Hello, everyone. Welcome to MD Media. This is the weekly show, the H panel. Welcome again. We are live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Those who are following us live, please spread the word, so to speak, so that many can access us and view today's show and the past episodes and the futures to come. So today we'll be dealing with the topic of Ethiopia through the prism of Abiy Ahmed's latest speeches. Today I have the pleasure of having two of our weekly panelists, Faisal Robler from the West Coast and Professor Edgar Gabisa from Michigan. Welcome, gentlemen, again. And today we'll start as usual. What stood out for you during the past 7 days? Actually, we had to call it off last week because of Ethiopian Good Friday. So we can cover even 2 weeks, whatever stood out for you. Faisal?
Thank you very much. I think what stood for me this week and last week was the parliamentary election in Somalia. As you know, the election was delayed by a year and several months. It should have taken place in February of 2022. But because of President Mohamed Farmacho, who is an ally of Abiy and Isaias Afwerki, did not really conduct the election. It delayed. Nonetheless, after so many wranglings, it took place. So the first leg of the election, which meant to seat a new parliament, both upper house and lower house, took place. So what's very interesting about that exercise is that the leadership and who takes the leadership of the two houses is an education usually as to who could emerge as the next president. In the Senate, the speaker and two deputies is practically won by big numbers by the opposition. Farmacho literally walked out of that competition with zero gain. The lower house, which has 275, which is also where the bulk of the votes lie when the presidential election comes around, probably on May 9th or 10th of May. The speaker and the two deputies again went to the opposition, with Farmacho walking out with zero results. Basically, everybody is now expecting that not only would Farmacho lose, but he would be humiliated in a way that none of the previous losers experienced. That's on the front of Somalia. I think it was interesting to watch how Somalia, which was supposed to be a failed state, exercised that democratic, if you will, small step. Nobody used guns or whatever, but the election took place. In addition to that, I think there is a slew of information that pertain to Ethiopia. As you know, that there is a new person who would be heading the Horn of Africa National Security Council by the name of Maureen Farrell. She's a Horn of Africa specialist, and we have to watch what she can do in the Horn. The second is the U.S. Chargé d'Affaires, Tracy Jacobson, went to Gonder in the Somali region to pay some sort of attention to the thousands of Somalis who have been displaced because of famine. And I think she saw with her eyes everything. And then the third news item is the UN Council's statement that over 9 million Ethiopians are victims of famine. And I would say that's a very conservative number. In the Somali area, you can say over 50% of the people have been impacted. In Tigray, it's about 5 million. Leave it, take it or leave it. 90% of the people are suffering from some sort of famine related. In Oromia, as we speak, the large scale dislocation is taking place in Oromia. So, with all that, where Somalia is taking a step toward this stability, Ethiopia seems to be really faltering at the seams, and that's probably a segue to our discussion today, and I will leave it here.
Thank you, Faisal. Scale, what stood out for you?
I think what Faisal said is really significant because there was an axis of evil in the Horn of Africa, and one of the legs has fallen right now. And that is a good thing to recognize that the axis of dictators that promised everybody that they would inaugurate a new era in the Horn of Africa, in the image of Isaias Afwerki's authoritarian dictatorial rule in Eritrea, one of the three legs had fallen in um, Mogadishu, and that's a good development that the people of Somalia took matters into their own hands to determine their own fate. I just could not resist commenting on that. But what stood out for me is what is being talked about today, this week in Ethiopia. I think um, I would be remiss if I didn't mention it even, and that is the Gonder massacre. That is really what stood out for me as a tragedy that occurred, but also as an emblem, as a testament to what is going on in the country and what is holding out what is really in store for this country. Now, what happened is that a well-known and well-respected Muslim cleric who lived in that city for so many years, Sheikh Kamal Lagas by name, he died. As people, his family and friends were conducting his interment, according to the description of the regional government, an altercation occurred over a few rocks the Muslim mourners wanted to use as a temporary marking for the burial site. At that time, a bomb was thrown at the mourners and an automatic weapon was used. Some say a rapid firing gun was used to fire on the mourners. As a result, depending on the source of information, between 21 to 40 people were killed. About 14 mosques were burned to the ground. About 100 people were injured. Properties belonging to Muslims in the city were destroyed. And all of this occurred, and the regional government's description of what happened is denial, denial that it ever occurred, and cover up. Denial because the regional authorities described the massacre, what I call a massacre, as a minor incident between two persons. An unfortunate occurrence as far as they're concerned, but of course what happened is what happened. The federal government did not even recognize that an event, a minor event at that, as the regional government says, occurred until today. They did not comment on what happened, on what even the regional government described as a minor incident. For days, the federal government did not even comment on it. The death of as high as 40 citizens of the city was downgraded to a minor skirmish that should be forgiven and forgotten. So justice was sacrificed. It's denial. It's denial because the regional authorities failed to take responsibility for the breakdown of law and order in that city. The regional officials denied that a massacre ever occurred, saying that it was religious conflict cannot happen in Gonder city, a city they described as an emblem of religious tolerance. We know from everything that what the regional government said is contrary to what we know about Gonder and northern Ethiopia. But to be specific about Gonder, we know that Gonder is a city in which Jews, otherwise referred to as Falasha, lived in a ghetto. They lived in a ghetto in the city of Gonder for centuries, a ghetto called Adisalam. And Muslims were never allowed to express themselves as Muslims in that city. This claim is really an outrageous claim that this is a city of intolerance. It goes against what we know about Gonder and the entire Amhara region. Now, keep in mind, and I think people need to know about this, that keep in mind that it's not the first time. It's not the first time Muslims were killed and mosques were burned in Gonder city. Some 2.5 years ago, several mosques were burned in the city, in the area of the city called Makane Salah. Muslim store-owned stores were ransacked in the city in a quarter called Loza. Keep in mind that Muslims requested last week, to hold iftar on the city streets, as they do in other cities in Ethiopia. The reaction from residents of Gonder or people who believe that they're Gondaris who live somewhere else is that this will be a stain on Gondar's reputation. If Muslims, city residents, held iftar on the city streets, that would be a stain. Keep in mind, in Amhara region, in Mota, about 2 or 3 years ago, 4 mosques were burned, and we saw it on TV that those who lit the mosques on fire, the arsonists, were going around it and dancing as if something good was happening. It is in the same region. As this had happened in Gonder city, a day or a couple of days ago, what happened in Gonder was repeated in a city that is about 100 kilometers to the northeast of Gonder in Dabark. The same thing happened. So the Gonder incident wasn't an incident of a minor skirmish. It was a premeditated, pre-planned act whose purpose was to send a signal to the Muslims in the city of Gonder and probably in the entire area of Amhara region that they don't belong in the city's public square. That is really what happened. The reason that I say this, and this is important for people to hear it, is that the same brouhaha was witnessed in Addis Ababa, in Finfinne, this year. This year, Orthodox politicians, and I am very careful in using that word, these are Orthodox politicians, not the religious people. They publicly bristled at the notion that Muslims requested to hold a street iftar in Addis Ababa. This year and last year, when the Waqifata celebrated or asked to celebrate publicly the Irecha festival, and when Protestants this year were asked to worship in Massacre Square, Orthodox politicians say this is what we own. This is a place that is sacred to our believers. No other believer could celebrate at the public square that is owned by the municipality. What happened in Gonder is simple religious bigotry. It is religious bigotry gone wild. It is Islamophobia par excellence. It is a manifestation of how much things have gone terribly awry in that country. It's not a minor skirmish. It was an attack, premeditated attack, an expression of Islamophobia. And that's where this country is today. And that's what stood out for me.
Thank you, Scale. And after I think we are hearing reports of mosques being burned in a number of cities and areas. At the same time, the burning down of churches, Orthodox and I think Protestant churches as well in other parts of the country. In fact, it's this year, just this week, Shuttle Trumbo published an article on the war in Ethiopia, and he's talking about a number of wars actually going on, and the Gonder massacre is again another front that is unfortunately seems to be unfolding. So this is the anatomy of Ethiopia civil war. It's dated May 2022, coming next week on the current history. This is a journal, and Shuttle is talking about Tigray federal government of Ethiopia war, the Amhara Tigray of Ethiopia, the Amhara Tigray war, and the Eritrea-Tigray war, and the Oromo and Federal Government of Ethiopia war. And all this with different objectives happening at the same time. So this is the Ethiopia we want to see, but through the prism of Abiy, and maybe with a reflection on what each of the panelists think about the number of speeches. Actually, maybe this past 2 weeks, I would say were very intensive in terms of Abiy coming on the TV. Some insiders are saying they are broadcasted as live, but at least there are 3 4 years, 3 or 4 days in the making, in the editing, not even in the media houses of the government, but in the palace. They are being edited and somehow doctored in a way. So the topic for today is Ethiopia through the prism of Abiy Ahmed's latest speeches. So he was talking to the military. That is how he started first, and then he went on to talk in Waghemra again with the same military uniform, and then he came up with a training, new paradigm, new politics. This is to his central committee in the PP party, where everyone seems to be attentively taking notes. So Faisal, take it from here.
Thank you very much. Let me just follow up with what Scale presented in terms of the religious, I hope not religious war, but what appears to be a religious war. And as a Muslim, it's very important for me to read it within a historical context. As Scale suggested, it has been happening, but it has been happening for a long time. It has been just brewing and developing in a very steady way. With the EPRDF taking power, there has been a semblance of some sort of broadcasted equality between cultures and religions and what have you. And in the meantime, I think millions and millions of Muslims who have been kept under the carpet are finally waking up, not only to their rights, but also to what the outside world looks and what they can have within the country in which they live. So I think despite the xenophobic that's coming from the extremists on the Amhara side, this is also an expression of Ethiopian Muslims finally recognizing that it is either do or die when it comes to their rights. So there is no easy solution to this. I think the hate mongering groups who are burning mosques and killing innocent Muslims should live up to the reality that this is not going to stop. Muslims will grow, they will be big, they will be praying at the Meskel Square, which is now a national square. Maybe during Haile Selassie it was a cross Meskel Square. It's no longer Meskel Square. So I think those who wanted to own public spaces in a negative way are having an uphill battle to wage. In terms of seeing Ethiopia through the prism of Abiy, I think we talked about this Abiy's political inclination, and we said he's an autocrat, he's this and that. And I would just start with Abiy being the personal ruler kind of thing. There is no institution in Ethiopia at this point in time that really runs the country except Abiy. And what happens when a person rules and runs a complex country like Ethiopia with layers and layers of historical challenges, simply issues that have been brewing and that have been kept under the carpet can easily deteriorate into a fight that cannot be controlled. If Abiy cannot mediate and doesn't have the institutional capacity in the country, and when I say institutional capacity, I mean institutions of learning, religious centers, traditional centers, and political groups that do represent certain constituents. If all these groups are not employed to take care of the situation which we are facing, I think any little issue in Ethiopia can deteriorate itself into a conflict. With Abiy talking to the army, I thought it was a bit scary. I think he's telling them to fight and to take everything under their wing. Abiy is a soldier, and basically, soldiers in general are also reflective of the larger society. They are as corrupt as the society is, and they behave the same way that the other parts of the society is. And Abiy is aware of that when he's telling the army to do their job, to make sure that they have power. He knows that he can entice them and put them in a position where they can serve him. So that's Abiy, the soldier or the army. Then you have Abiy the prophet, who really came into the politics in the last 4 years, believing, and he has an entourage of people who believing that he's not only a politician, he's more than that. He is a prophet, and a prophet is the one that steers the ship. Nobody in Ethiopia can be the captain of the ship. And everybody, whether it is a big priest, a religious Muslim, or a traditional elder, whether they are sultanis or abagadas, they all need to bow to him because he came to a belief system that he is the only one who can carry this nation. And lastly, with all those three characters that you see with Abiy, his infatuation with personal rule, Abiy the soldier, Abiy the prophet, it is transformed him into what political scientists call the Mobutu of the era. Abiy literally is the Mobutu of the 21st century in Africa, in the sense that if you noticed when he came to this, he became what Mobutu used to do, authenticity, trying to show the people that he's going back to the original Ethiopian values, to the way they dress Ethiopians, to even dress not only himself, but dress other people from other cultures, such as the Somali, Mustafa. This is what Mobutu used to, in order to show outside people that he's completely changing the nature of this nation, and he knows the values of this country. He embarked on these programs. So probably I will come back to those issues, but the Abiy that you are seeing has been transforming himself from the prophet, from the personal rule, from the Abiy soldier, which he has been showing us lately, into this Mobutu style that literally when somebody becomes the Caesar of the country, he does everything, anything that was in the past outside his prison. So I think the Ethiopia that we see today is Abiy's Ethiopia, and I'll stop here.
Great, thank you, Faisal. Scale, I know it has been a very, intensive week with all his trainings, his speeches, his appearance on TV, and so on. But what can we make out of all this training and speeches and the ultimate teacher?
Um, I think Faisal reminds me about some of my early graduate school days where we talked about African politics. We were discussing in classes, and we were discussing all of these people, Mobutu and others. Mobutu is seen as a patrimonial state, they called it at that time. But Abiy is not just Mobutu. You could see Bokassa in him. You could see Iadema in him. You could see Amin in him. It's a composite. It's one somebody today, it's somebody else tomorrow. An elusive target to pin down, but definitely one of those people or a composite of all of them together. Just wanted to react to that. I was reminded of these models of personalist rule, patrimonial rule, predatory rule in Africa. It's coming again to back to Africa after the era of democratization. We're back to the Zairianization or the authenticity of the 1970s. Amazing. But what do I see through the speeches and the writings or the press statements that Abiy was issuing day after day after day after day, almost for 5 days. Look, he talks in terms of historical evolution in grand terms to try to situate what he is doing, because at the end of the day, what he wants to discuss is this new paradigm and new politics. And he is trying to claim a place for his new paradigm and new place. On one level, that's what you see when he talks about the evolution of ideas and evolution of change. At the same time, he also places himself and his rule or his phenomenon of the Prosperity Party in the change that is sweeping the globe at this moment in time. Whether that is to claim a space for him, to give himself a place in world history, or global interdependence and change, I do not know what he wants, but he also wants to put himself in that claim, claim a place for himself in what is going on in the country. Whether that is to avoid responsibility or whether that is to claim, I really don't know. But in terms of temporally speaking, he talks about longue durée, and then, of course, dismisses that by talking about local issues at the same time. But he's really talking about this paradigm shift, or a new paradigm is what we really wants to talk about. What is he talking about when he talks about this, the overall idea of new paradigm or a paradigmatic shift? What he is saying is the era of, these are contents that I'm really talking about from the myriad claims that he had made in all of his speeches. What he's suggesting is the era of revolutionary democracy, the era of the EPRDF organizing principle of revolutionary democracy is over. The new era of Medemer or addition or synergy is in. That's the shift. It's a shift in terms of ideology. He's also claiming that the era of multinational federation is out, and the era of a unitary state with a Leviathan at the pinnacle of that state is in. And then thirdly, the era of the 1991 shift, the era of the 1991 political settlement is over, and the era of Prosperity Party led by the Messiah is in. So the general theme of what he wanted to telegraph as he speaks to the military, as he speaks to high-ranking government officials, and as he speaks to his political operatives, that's the grand thing, that there is a shift. There is a there is a paradigm shift. He calls it new paradigm. And that is basically the shift in the new paradigm and the new politics. That means from now on, the politics of nations and nationalists, the right of nations and nationalists to self-determination is not going to be talked about. It's old. That's not new politics. The era of group rights, where nations and nationalities and peoples in Ethiopia could claim that their group rights be respected as nations, as nationalities, is going to go by the wayside. It's going to be replaced by the right of the individual. The era of Ethiopia, conceived by the constitution as a political community, is out. It's being replaced by the era of ideas. That's what he's talking about. The ideas, where ideologies actually guide politics and policies. That's basically what he is saying. Now, it would be a long time if I kind of try to why I say all of this, but that's basically what he is talking about. If you break it down, you see promises That he, and we'll come back to all of that. He makes promises in all of his speeches. He also issues warnings in his speeches. It's also an adventure in self absolution. Everything that has gone wrong in Ethiopia has nothing to do with me. They've always been here. I did not bring it. I never bear no responsibility. If anything, you, the Ethiopian people, and I'll come to this. You, the Ethiopian people, pay responsibility for famine, for drought. You are the cause, not me. For the religious conflict and everything, you are responsible. These are the things that he's talking about. And now I will say this and I'll stop because, Getachew, you raised the issue that this were really heavily edited. This is really, really bad. If this is what is good, the good part of what is edited, if this is good, I hate to see the worst part.
Yeah, yeah. Faisal, you wanna reflect on that?
No, actually, I've been saying that for the whole week. If this is the edited product that Abiy feels comfortable, I really don't want to hear and see the pre-edited version of this guy's talks. But let me just come back to a couple of things. Unless you have anything, Abiy comes. I mean, I would not psychoanalyze him because I don't have that capacity, but I can draw from patterns of dictators and autocrats and bad rulers that we have seen in the scene of Africa. As a teacher, you have seen Abiy throws things. And when he is teaching these grown-up men and women who are supposed to be the nation's leaders are acting, not taking, acting as if though they are taking copious notes. They are moving their pens. They are really paying attention. They know he's bullshitting and he's not saying anything. They probably know more than he does. And basically, one of the symbols of a dictator or autocratic rule is that everything that they say to them seems meaningful. I will give you a very good example. In the heydays of when socialism was very important, Barre used to give 5 hours speeches. He would literally be smoking almost a pack of cigarettes while everybody's listening to him and taking notes. And he would say some stupid things like, in Somalia, we don't have a proletariat class, but we have the nomads, and our nomads are our working class, things like that. And people will act like they are very serious. And here is Abiy. I wish I could hear this comment that he's saying, but everything that comes from him is so useless. And the audience and the people who are sitting there, who traveled all the way from Jigjiga, from Walaga, from Afar area, and spent thousands and thousands of needed money, are acting just to please him and show this guy that he is a king. That's one thing. So it's a foolishness that he thinks he's teaching. Secondly, I think Escal touched it a little bit. He lost to understanding the difference between a politician and an academic. The two are totally different. Academicians are paid big dollars to poke ideas, to make titillations of the other side. So when they write something or they say something that's outlandish, another academician can come and undo what that person said or unpack. And they're paid for that. That's their job, to synthesize and undo what you have said. Abiy is a leader of 120 million country that is as complex as any other country on earth. So his words cannot be the words of a history teacher who talks about Gudit when she burned churches and mosques and say Ethiopians used to always burn churches, they used to burn mosques, they used to kill each other in the thousands. Muslims used to be killed by Christians and vice versa. And academicians can say that and write down the issues and the background and the synthesis. A leader cannot say that because as he knows, some teenage kid who is hungry, angry, like Hitler, who comes back from the war of Tigray, who was lied to by the government, who is probably limping because a gun hit him, sees a Muslim who is fed, very, very well fed, who has a nice grocery or shop, and that kid will take his anger because Abiy said that Muslims used to be killed all the time. What prevents that kid from? So, because of an intellectual inferiority, in my opinion, he could not see the difference between a leader and an academician. I work. There are things that I can never say in public when I am on duty for my government or for my job. But you can pontificate. Scale is a professor. He's paid to sometimes anger other side so that they can come back and give him another alternative. Abi is not like that. He's supposed to be an inspirational speaker with a content that he can implement. When you cannot implement something, you don't promise. So I think he completely misunderstood his role as the leader of this complex country. And now, because he sees some of the seeds that he saw are coming back to haunt him, I wish I was a psychologist and I take the alibi to say that I'm not. Abiy is not behaving normally. The way that his body language, the way he's jumping from one subject to another, the way, as Scale was saying, he's coming back to correct what he made wrong yesterday, and then he makes more mistakes. The guy needs to slow down. He needs some people to intervene and tell him that he is on the right course and he's crashing. As far as I can see, he cannot even attain and control the mechanics that dictators or autocrats because they need some stability. Autocrats are sometimes very stable. Abiy is losing that. Thank you.
Great. Uh, Talking about the contradictory things he mentions within the speech, and sometimes he also repeatedly actually complains about not being grateful to him, the people, the country, whoever he is making a subject matter and so on. What is your reading of how these speeches are being received by the outside actors? I mean, outside in this case, outside those who are taking the training or getting educated, quote unquote. Professor Scale?
I kind of agree with Faisal that I'm sure there are some smart people in that hall, wherever he's speaking. I'm sure there are, and you could see sometimes in their body language. You could see it. You could see in the body language. But in front of a brutal dictator, they just have to act. That's that's the way it is. Now he is showing behaviors, and of course I'm not a psychiatrist. He's showing behaviors um, that are associated with psychopath. That's what you're seeing. That's basically what you're seeing in him, exacerbated, especially this couple of days that he looks very angry, very assertive, and blames everybody else other than himself. He gets mad at people who are not praising him. Basically, that's what you're seeing. But there is this grandiose idea in his head about himself. Look, when he promises Ethiopia that Ethiopia will be one of the leading countries in Africa or in the world, and he keeps repeating that, saying that in one of his speeches, especially when he was talking to the party cadres. He was saying that we are what we are doing here, what we are deciding here, it's all about the next generation. It's about the next generation, and he says the next generation is not going to face the problems that we faced because we will have resolved it for them. So Ethiopia next time would be a prosperous country. The problem with that is that the disconnect with reality. I don't want to go into the numbers, but every economic indicator that should be up is down. Every economic indicator that should be down is up in that country. Unemployment should be down, it's up. Inflation should be down, it's up. GDP must be up, but it is down. Exports should be up, but it is down. He speaks to the Ethiopian people that this is the time of prosperity. But he says, you're not prospering because you're ungrateful. You're ungrateful, he says. In this country, he says, good people aren't praised. That's why we are poor. The reason, his explanation for Ethiopia's chronic poverty is that Ethiopians are ungrateful. I didn't make it up. He said that they are ungrateful. Of course, what he's saying is that their Ethiopians are not recognizing his good work. One of the strangest things, in addition to the notes, the note taking, the feverish uh, note taking, is the setting. That is surprising to me, especially the one that you're looking in Wag Hemra. This is a war zone. Just a few months ago, this was a war zone. I am sure it's devastated. There are all kinds of shortages. There are all kinds of sites that require reconstruction. He talks to them about Aksum, that they actually built Aksum, that talks about Lalibela, how great they are. These are people who live in the present. And he's saying, you were great in the past. He is talking to them about how strongly he withstood against the Security Council. 11 times he calls it. Why he is speaking to the people of Wag Hemra, who are hard pressed to make ends meet today, why he is talking about the Security Council victories that he had, I cannot imagine. I cannot understand, except saying that he will probably go home that night and sleep soundly because he spoke about his victories, all intangible victories, but albeit he spoke about them. When he says Meddemer, and he brought this thing back after abandoning it for so many months and years, a year, he's comparing this with the philosophy of Karl Marx, Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, and Mao Zedong. He is also saying his philosophy, which is an homegrown philosophy, supplants liberalism as well. I didn't make it up. He says that is what he's doing, because every other means of improving Ethiopia, every other ideology that had been tried in Ethiopia had failed because they were all imported. Now he has come up with a new ideology of Maddamer. But if you look at what has happened in Ethiopia, Maddamer meaning addition or synergy as he calls it, every indication that you see in Ethiopia, about 500,000 people being killed, 2 million, 2 million cattle dead in Oromia, 2 million cattle dead in the Somali region. There is no Maddamer. There is no addition in there. There is nothing that was added to Ethiopia. But he says Maddamer is going to be Ethiopia's salvation. If you don't accept it, you're not going to be great and you're going to regret it, is what he's saying. You're going to regret it. And he says this not to Ethiopia and Ethiopians alone, the entire world, he says. If they reject Maddamer, they're going to lose it. They're going to miss. Greatness is going to elude them. Well, what do you say of the person who believes in his own ideas and tells the entire world, forget about the politics of the left, forget about liberalism, forget about socialism. There is synergism, and if you don't accept that, all is going to be lost. I don't know how to describe that. I don't know how to say what he is doing is really acceptable. Now, if I keep on going with this one, I'll take time away from it, but we'll come back to other things that he said in his speech of what I call self absolution, but I'll come back to that. I don't know what to make of this man. I really don't.
Hmm. Faisal, any reflection on that?
No, I mean, as you know, it's really difficult to keep up with him because, as we said redundantly, he's all over the map, and what's that indicates is to people who study behavior is probably something. But those of us who are interested in his political posturing, I think. I mean, I sometimes I feel very sad for him maybe I say he to myself, maybe he didn't study as much he would have liked, because he, the as much as we are not Westerners, but the Western philosophies that most of the world today endorse it, that goes back all the way to ancient days, and then also stole some philosophies and thinking from the Africans and the Middle East. Today is a composite of knowledge that the whole world is trying to use, reform, but use to the extent possible. A very good example is the American Constitution. I mean, the man who drafted that constitution was a slave owner who rejected his own children from Sally, the wife that he, was on the side married. And, still, some of the ideas that he drafted are some universal truth. The same with Mao's teachings and writings have some universal truths in some areas and not in other areas. Somebody wrote and said Karl Marx used to write on everything as long as he's 50% right. Some of those, what he wrote has been borrowed all over the world. The sad story about Abiy is here is a kid who grew up mostly in a military lifestyle, did not get even the chance that some of us got, by accident. I will not say we were born into, but by accident. And he wanted to say the entire human civilization in terms of thinking and thoughts is useless except his, which is crippled within a year's period. I mean, in my opinion, that doesn't even, I mean, we cannot miss it. But in a normal circumstance, if he was not the leader of Ethiopia with 120 million, we wouldn't even comment on things like that. Let me tell you what Somali region's leaders that are in his party say. And I will say in Somali, and then they say in Somali, Ilahu kanna dafi, which means, may Allah come and take this guy away. These are the top leaders who are saying this, because they cannot make sense of what he says. One of his last outlandish and defeatist comment that I heard from him, which he doesn't even think that he's admitting to us that he lost the battle, is when he said, peace is not there. The peace that you are talking outside in the country is not the real peace. The peace that we want is the one that you have inside. This is directly a quote from the Bible or any religion. When you can no longer control the worldly environment, you turn inwardly and say, I hope you can, if it's that comment that he's saying, he basically says, peace is what you have inside in your heart and in your brain, not the one that you see in the cities, by the churches, by the mosques, by the villages. And basically, he's admitting to this 120 million people that as an Abiy, I can no longer guarantee you peace, but I can tell you how to find the internal peace that God gives to us. And I thought that was his concluding remark as somebody who lost the battle.
I'm glad you mentioned that. You see everywhere kind of burden shifting, problem shifting. He shifts it from the real problem on the ground to something, inside, or either the problem of today, he says it will be solved, believe it or not, tomorrow. And he's talking about even all that synergy, madamer, it will be something that everybody in the world will, take up and so on. So let's go to your final thoughts, and maybe Professor Asgal, you were mentioning about how he tries to, I am clean, from all this. It's not my problem, and so on. So you can speak to that as well, and with that, your final thoughts for today.
All right. Now, if you just the tail end of what Faisal is saying about peace, he says there are some people. He speaks in Amharic, of course. He said some people say there is conflict in this country, but there is really no conflict. And it's amazing that he said there is a country that is embroiled in conflict. This is a country that is in civil war, a brutal one at that. But the way he characterizes it is some people say there is conflict.
Hmm.
But the conflict is not real. He says it's in your head. And the displacement that you said, it's in your head. He has the temerity, he has the audacity telling Ethiopians who are suffering the civil war itself and its the effects of that civil war that everything is in your head. Make peace in your head, everything will be all right. That's not a solution to real problems. It's denial. And denial doesn't solve any problem. The country is suffering from famine, inflation induced famine, or politics induced famine, or is a civil war induced famine. But there is a uh, shortage everywhere. Like I mentioned in Oromia, about 1 million cattle, in Somalia, 1 million cattle. And he's saying that Ethiopians suffer of food shortages and famine, not because we couldn't feed ourselves. He says, because we wanted to. Because we, almost he's saying, we love being uh, famished. That, and he says, I go around the city. Around the city, he says, I look at schools, I look at mosques, I look at churches that are fallow lands. The land is left fallow. You're not tilling it. You're not cultivating it. You're waiting, he said, for someone else to cultivate the land, to grow the crops, harvest it, and then feed you. And that's what you're suffering. So there isn't a real famine in Ethiopia in Abiy's head. There isn't. The people are suffering because they are lazy, because they are not tilling their church backyard or school backyard or mosque backyards. It's, you call it displacement. I call it just denial. He just doesn't want to take responsibility for what is going on, or maybe he doesn't see it. Um, he was comparing himself when he talks about war. He was comparing his victory over what he calls victory over Tigray, comparing it with Adwa in his speeches. From an anti-imperialist war is the same as winning a group, the TPLF. It's the same thing. It's denial, or maybe narcissism gone wild, that he really wants to be praised and recognized for everything. What's my last word? The man was also engaged in historical revisionism. He has been doing this for some time, maybe out of ignorance or maybe out of political calculation, where he could pit one group against another and he could come in as a peacemaker, or loom large as a man that is a man of peace that had won the Nobel Peace Prize. But what he was doing in Sakota about historical revisionism, it is really a recipe for a war in the north between two peoples who have lived together for so many years, but under his rule, under his gauge, they have now shed blood of each other. What I want to say is that this, whatever he is saying, is probably wishful thinking. It's not an ideology; it's wishful thinking. He's not accepting responsibility for anything. He is blaming somebody else. He's externalizing it. What what I see from that the prism of Abiy is that Ethiopia is really in deep, deep, deep trouble. In deep trouble, not because they are suffering economic meltdown, not just because Ethiopia is in the midst of civil war, not because the institutions are crumbling, not because there is no security for individuals, because Ethiopians under this man are unable to to rise up to the plate and solve their problems. The problems linger on as you deny it, as you have a man in office that is talking about contrary to reality only to simply make himself look good. Ethiopia will not be able to confront their problems. And because they're not going to confront their problems, they're not going to resolve it. So they are in the perpetual downward spiral of going from crisis to crisis to crisis and to ultimate destruction. That is my final word.
Thank you, Michael. Faisal, you can reflect on that, and maybe what we see in the US this week is as well uh, people like Brad Sherman talking to Blinken and even declining breaking bread with those who are starving their own people. So this is a meeting. Uh,
The Congress.
Shide, yeah, Ahmed Shide and his delegation with congressmen. You can reflect on that as well, and we final word with that.
Yeah, I think Brad Sherman refused to attend a dinner hosted for Shide. I think by the Ethiopian embassy. They must have been consulted by some people who said, just give to him the invitation and he will show up. That's how you work with Americans, although you guys have differences as long as you reach out. But Sherman literally said, I will not honor a minister who is part of the, his government that's killing people by starvation, whatever. So he declined. I think also Blinken was supposed to be addressing the U.S. Congress on the Ethiopian situation in human rights and whether he will define what had happened as genocide in Tigray. And he said they're working on that. But I understood as if though he was saying they're almost finishing that and they will probably turn in a verdict of genocide. That's how I took it. It could change. But again, the U.S. is speaking with the other side of its mouth. As you know, this week or last week, it approved $313 million in aid, USAID, knowing that some of that money will be used for the war. We know African governments, we know this guy who has already used a lot of the capital and money he used. So we know that much. We also know that another 300 million were also advanced by World Bank, although that's not still final. So America, in a way, is sustaining the regime on the one hand, but at the same time, they are saying other things. And why is the US doing this? I don't think it's because they like Abiy. I don't think they like, and you can talk to anybody in the State Department in private, and they will, or the National Security Council, and they will tell you they're fed up with this guy. But they have this Western psychology that says they don't want to see Ethiopia disintegrating, and the fear of Ethiopia's complete meltdown is in everybody's mind, which takes me to the north. I think Marara Gudina today said that suddenly people who have lived in the north for 3,000 years, the Amhara Tigray, can be killing each other this way, plus within Gonder and all that, is something that we cannot fathom. Who is behind this? Who is doing? We don't know. What we do know is that the earlier constituents of Abiy, who pampered him up and whom he invested politically, are today turning against him. Still, some of those people, not only are they sabotaging him, but they are trying to kill him politically. Is he paying them back by making sure that the North is not stable? Is he taking the conflict and the war back to Gonder, where he had extreme support through the Amhara elite? And now he knows that, that they are trying to bring him down. Is this the payback? We don't know. What we do know is that Abiy is not stupid not to recognize that the entire Amhara elite who has been supporting him wants him dead today. When I say dead, not only politically, but if they can do physically. And as an army man, as an autocrat, he wants to level up with them, and this is his way. That's a theory that anybody can easily be wooed to accept. Having said that, I think the North should be ready for some mischief on both sides. By Abiy's side, who will try to teach lessons to those people who are trying to fight against him. At the same time, the others will do something bad, like what we have seen with the attack of the Muslims and the mosques. I really feel very sad for the masses in the north, whether they are the Amaras, the Command, the Agaw, or the Tigres. This is a hot potato that Abiy is playing with, along with his former supporters, and that's too sad.
Thank you. And we have on UMD Media heard sources telling us that Abiy, like Faisal mentioned, has been approaching Tigray Defense Forces on maybe the attack on his former partners in crime or partners in genocide. With that, we end today's show. Thank you for your insight and hope to see you again with yet another topic on the Horn next week.
Welcome Eid. Next week is Eid, so
Yeah, Eid Mubarak in
Eid
advance.
Mubarak. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. You have been live showing, following us on YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, and two platforms on Facebook. This was the H Panel Weekly Show, and today's topic was Ethiopia through the prism of Abiy Ahmed's latest speeches. And we will see you again next week with the same program, but the weekly newly started program show by Yosef Gabrahewot, In Depth with Yosef G, will be back on Wednesday 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Please subscribe, share, like, so that many can reach our upcoming episodes and past shows as well. And please also press the notification bell so that you get notification whenever we have new episodes posted on our website. Good night from here.